Welcome back to my channel. My name is Olive. So I thought for this video I'm going to do another Q&A, but this time I sort of changed it up. I asked for some really deep, layered, thought-provoking questions from you guys. So without further ado, here we go. First question I got: what do you think happens when we die? I don't necessarily believe in the idea of heaven or hell. And I honestly think that when we die, we do just die in the sense of our physical body obviously dies, but perhaps there's this idea of like our consciousness either continues onwards into a future life or it's being brought from a past life. So not necessarily like the karmic cycle of birth and rebirth and death and all that kind of stuff. But I do sometimes feel, and I've had this conversation a number of times with some people, that I sometimes feel like an old soul in the sense that I have lived many lives previously and have sort of like extracted knowledge from those lived experiences, and I'm now in this like vessel, if you want to call it that. Whereas some people that I meet, I sometimes feel like they are younger souls, maybe it is like their first cycle of life or whatever you want to put it as, and maybe don't have this like layered kind of awareness or knowledge. But that's just me personally. So yeah, that's my kind of viewpoint on death. Is it possible to be passionate about health, fitness and nutrition without developing unhealthy habits? Very interesting question. So I think yes, it's obviously possible, but there are the potentials for you to develop unhealthy habits along the way. But speaking to Sylvia about this, it's sort of also where it comes from and where you are at in terms of your level of self-acceptance and sort of self-love. So for me, when I first started out my journey with health and fitness and nutrition, I was in a very sort of damaged place when it came to self-acceptance. I really disliked who I was. So I engaged in all these sort of activities in a really unhealthy way that was detrimental to my health. They were very obsessive habits, and I'm still sort of recovering from the long-term effects of that. However, I am now in a place where I am more aware of myself, I am accepting of that, and I have deeper love for who I am. So as a result, my nutrition intake, my movement habits sort of reflect that. It's less what it looks like on the outside and more how it makes me feel on the inside. So yeah, I don't think it's not as easy as it being black and white. It's something within you that has to make that sort of relationship with health and fitness not be unhealthy. So kind of leading on from that last question, what is the highest goal one can achieve in life? So I personally think obviously it's so dependent on the individual, but in my perspective, the best goal that anyone can ever attain is radical self-love and self-acceptance. Because once you are so comfortable in who you are and how you present yourself, it just speaks volumes, and your confidence and your awareness just takes you so many places. So I think if there's one thing that you're striving towards, it's to find that radical self-acceptance and self-love. What are the main aspects of yourself you think will change in 10 years' time? Okay, so difficult question for the start. Reason being, like, main aspects you think are sort of like positive things about you and you don't think they would necessarily change. So my first and most basic response to this will be my appearance will change. Obviously, my appearance changes every like 2 months. My hair, my physical body, I will have more tattoos in 10 years' time. And the reason why I say that my appearance is so attached to my main aspect of self is because it's taken me a very long time to be fully accepting of this expression of me and myself. So that is one reason. The other thing I think would hopefully start to change, and I've already started to work a little bit more around my triggers and understanding them, but I'd like to think in 10 years' time I'm less reactive to them and I'm more understanding of them as well, and perhaps less sort of, when a trigger arises, understanding that it's not necessarily that individual who's caused that trigger, it's the trigger from the past, if that makes sense. So I'm not attaching it onto other people who haven't presented that trigger to me before. So just having a deeper understanding of that, and hopefully being less judgmental of myself, of others, and just being generally more comfortable in who I am. Is character crafted, or is it revealed by life's most difficult moments? And I'm not allowed to say both equally. Okay, this is interesting because this is kind of like the whole nature-nurture debate that you have in psychology. And I think that when it comes to life's difficult moments, it's so dependent on the individual. So, for example, say it's a traumatic event, that individual has the chance to react then, or they learn from it further down the line when they are in a safe space to deal with that traumatic event. So I don't think like life's most difficult situations create character. They are a catalyst for character growth. Whereas I think your character is crafted through various life events, whether they are positive, whether they are negative, your interactions with different people, your loved ones, your friends, your strangers, whatever. So I think overall, your character is largely crafted by your environment and who you are around, and maybe difficult life events are a catalyst for growth of new facets of your character. Yeah, thanks for that one. That was really challenging. I like that. Okay, so this one relates to yoga. Why is yoga largely populated by women? So I'm going to start off by saying, I think, first of all, just to clarify that statement, I think yoga is largely populated by women in the West. If you look back to the origins of where yoga came from in India, it was engaged with by people of all ages and all genders relatively equally. Now, I think that the majority of practitioners in the West are female because of the way that it's presented in the media, number one. Like, you just have to look at massive brands and corporations like Lululemon and Alo Yoga. Vast majority of the time, you have a slim white woman practicing yoga. Secondly, you have to look at the reason why women engage more in yoga. Inherently, we have a hormone called relaxin in our body, which is there for when we give birth, meaning that we are naturally a little bit flexible than men. So maybe it's one of these things that when women engage in yoga, they find it easier to sustain because they are naturally flexible, whereas for men, it's something slightly harder to be involved with. Another reason could be that yoga could be seen as quite a soft movement practice. And quite gentle. If you've never been to power yoga, good luck. And as a result, it's maybe seen as quite a feminine way to move, which maybe men don't want to be involved with because it could be seen as emasculating or whatever it is that's, the stereotype around it. But it's so ironic because yoga is, again, for everyone. You just have to look back to India, and the majority of the gurus were male. So I don't know why it's been so far removed from what it was in the East as it is in the West, obviously through colonization and all of this kind of stuff and representation of all bodies. And maybe one of the reasons why it's so largely populated by women was because one of the very first people to bring yoga over from India to the West was a lady called Indra Devi, and she studied under the father figure of modern yoga, Krishnamacharya, and she brought it over to America in the early 1900s, and she was one of the first yoga teachers for Hollywood. So maybe that's as well where the association comes from. It was seen by this petite woman, and as a result, more women engaged in it because it was seen as a more feminine thing to do. Potentially, that's the reason. I guess through all of this, just deeper inclusivity and representation of all races, all genders, all ages is a way to sort of just allow practitioners of all these sort of realms to engage in it. Because at the end of the day, yoga is for everyone. Next question. Best advice for helping someone that's grieving? I'm no professional in this kind of realm, but my first instinct would be to allow yourself to feel everything you are feeling and knowing that it's valid, whether that is anger, whether that is sadness, sitting and trying to perhaps process those emotions and being kind to yourself for processing them, finding the support of loved ones around you if you can. one of the things, I worked with an 84-year-old lady who lost her husband after so many years of marriage, and I would regularly see her once a week just for a bit of movement and mobility. But a lot of the time we would just sit there and do pranayama or breath work, because for her, she really lost the ability to breathe deeply, and as a result she was always in a slightly more elevated, anxious and stressful state. So for me, it was really beneficial to teach her how to breathe deeply and regain that ability to do so. But again, that was so personal to her. But yeah, I hope you find some solace. Has your emotional connection and response to yoga developed and evolved as your journey has? I definitely feel like my emotional response to my practice has changed over the past, 7-8 years that I've been doing it. When I first started, it was for very selfish, externally validated reasons, I guess. It was more like, oh, I just want to be able to make myself a contortionist. And I had no real understanding about the layers and the depths of the practice beyond just the physical side of it. So yeah, definitely has changed over the years. I'm now a little bit more in touch with myself as to what I want from the yoga practice that day, whether it is asana, whether it is pranayama, whether it is meditation, whether it's taking a form of something else like eating with complete concentration, which is another one of the limbs, dharana. So it's definitely changed over the years. It's less motivated for external validation. It's now rooted deeply within what I actually want and what I actually need that day, there and then. I'm going to read you the next question because it's framed a little bit differently. I had an interesting conversation with someone the other day whose opinion was that yoga and other spiritual practices are welcoming in the devil, and I wanted to know what your thoughts were. So I have been again practicing yoga 7-8 years. I've taught 100 plus classes over 3 years that I've been teaching. Not once have I seen the devil. Not once have I seen him in my class, in my self-practice, or have I known any of my students to see him. So make of that what you will. Do you think 15-year-old you could ever imagine being where you are today? Definitely not. I think when I was 15, as most 15-year-olds were or are, very lost, very confused in my sense of self, very overwhelmed by the world of possibilities, and just trying to figure out life and survive. So yeah, I definitely don't think me at 15 would imagine me being here, being on YouTube, teaching people yoga, living in Brighton, having the life I have. Definitely not. But you know what? All things happen for a reason, and I'm here because I obviously felt like that was my path. Ironically enough, I do feel like I always was destined to be a teacher in some kind of regard. I always felt like that was who I wanted to be. I always remember thinking at school, I had no idea what I wanted to do at university or be what I, when I grow up. I always sort of had the fallback idea of being a PE teacher at my old school, because they all just looked like they had such a great time all the time. So I was like, oh, I could do that. Lo and behold, I'm now a teacher of some sort. So I don't know. Thoughts on the concept of inner self, so deepening self-understanding, and where I'm currently at. So the inner self is obviously related to your belief systems, your values, your emotions, how you process things, your spirituality, whatever it is, all these things that live inside. And I don't think that you can go through life without actually understanding the inner self, because again, all of our behavior kind of stems from the inner self, and the outer self is just like a vessel that kind of just holds everything together. So for me personally, the past year and a half or whatever has been a massive pivotal point for me, really honing in and understanding my inner self, whether it was because of the pandemic and having more time to actually sit and understand all of that stuff, whether it's because I'm at that age where I'm starting to develop a little bit more certain areas in the brain where I'm working towards solidifying my personality. Point is that I've started to really understand who I am, understand my triggers, understand my personality, my beliefs, my values, all of this kind of stuff. And as a result of that, as an amalgamation of all those things, it's then presented externally into my outer self. So how I interact with people, how I dress, how I talk, how I look. So I think, one can't exist without the other, and that's vice versa. So yes, that is where I'm at, and that is my belief system with it. You can't exist just purely with the outer self or just purely with the inner self. They have to intertwine and they have to mix together. It's not as black and white as we think it is. Slightly more light-hearted question. If you were an animal, what would you be and why? Interesting. I have a couple different answers for this because I'm indecisive and I can't choose. Perhaps like a big mammal in the sea, like a whale, because I think it would be fascinating to be able to explore the depths of the ocean, because as humans we just really haven't seen that much of it. So maybe like a blue whale, because they are massive and they can survive in such extremes. So maybe a blue whale. But I would also really love to be able to fly, so maybe like a bird of prey, like an eagle, because they are untouchable, and they're just massive, and they live in, obviously, usually America, incredible landscape, so it'd be great to be able to be a bird and fly. But then I'd also probably have a great time being a cheetah, because they run so fast, and it would be incredible to have that kind of power. So I don't know, it's really hard to choose. Either a blue whale, either an eagle, or a cheetah. Don't know. Sylvia just told me that that question actually means how I want people to perceive me. So make of that what you will, depending on how well you actually know me. Excellent. Final question. What's your experience as a third culture kid? Where do you feel most at home? Okay, so definition, third culture kid is someone who's grown up in a country where they are not from. So for context, I am half Indian, my mother's Indian, and I'm half European. My dad is European, but I hold a British passport because I was born in England, but I grew up in Dubai for 18 years. So in terms of me growing up in Dubai, I had a great time. It was a very, very diverse, multicultural place to grow up in, but there are, again, certain traumas and triggers that I am now working through, understanding the two sides of me and having grown up there that I'm now processing. But it's really weird because I feel too brown to say I'm from England, and I feel too white to say I'm from India. So when in the past I've come to England, I have felt like I haven't belonged. When I went to India, I also felt like I didn't belong there because there was this other half of me that didn't make me look like everyone else around me. So Dubai was a very, very beautiful place in that sense because I felt like I just fit in over there. In terms of where I feel at home, Dubai will always feel like home for me because, again, it's a place that I grew up and my family still live out there. But I think home is also such an individual sort of based question, and it's not necessarily a place, it's how you feel in that place. So right now, Brighton feels to me like home because I have such a beautiful group of friends around me who support me, who love me, and I am immersed in such a wonderful community over here, and I really feel like I've found a sense of home in myself here. So home is not necessarily a place, it's kind of like a feeling as well, and the environment that's around me. But yeah, third culture kid, I wouldn't change it for the world. It's a very interesting thing to be. It's an interesting story, but obviously comes with its own, not pitfalls, but things that you have to process and deal with as well. So thank you for listening, and thank you for sending me those deep layered questions. I had a good time working through them, really challenged me in a different kind of way. So yeah, if you had any comments or questions, obviously pop them down below in the comment section. Tell me if you like this and I will create more like that. But otherwise, I will see you next time.